Hi everyone, welcome back to ELT in Brazil. This video is the second part of our discussion on basic principles on reading. As you saw in the previous video, we got very excited because we were coming back to our channel, and the discussion ended up being very lengthy. We wanted the video to be 12 to 15 minutes long, and we probably went over the 30-minute mark, I guess. So here's the second part of our discussion on basic principles to teach reading. Roda a vinheta. So when it comes to reading, Valdir, what is the number one thing to keep in mind, in your opinion?
I guess that the first thing that I think about when somebody says, "Oh, what are the basic principles of teaching reading?" The first thing is, can you really teach a skill? And then to me, it all falls on like, are we gonna do this? Like, is it gonna be a bottom up approach? So we're gonna go. We're gonna be analytical. We're gonna be looking at the language to help someone read, or we're going to go top down.
Can you expand a bit more on top down and bottom up? I think it's important.
Sure. Some time ago, and I mean like about 2 years ago, maybe we had a video, and we talked about language being. There were two terms in there.
You mean atomistic and holistic?
Exactly, yeah. Atomistic and holistic. And when you look at language, looking atom by atom, item by item, you're looking at the like, you're going to analyze the sentences, how they work, maybe the sounds, then you are going to go bottom up.
And then so, bottom up means going from the little pieces to the big picture, to meaning, right? So letters to syllables to words to sentences to paragraphs to text and background meaning and understanding. Okay.
Yes. Then if you use a top-down approach, then you're not going to focus on that. You're probably going to focus on understanding the context. To me, that's the first thing that you have to think about. So what do you believe in as a teacher? Like I used to believe that we should be teaching and using top-down approach like all the time. Plus, they're very different for the students because the students are at this point, they're very used to top-down. So it's kind of tiring. It's that old story, like things get old really quickly in the classroom, right? So it's good to have that variation.
I agree. And especially if we teach reading, for example, always top down. So top down would be you bring a question to the class to get students thinking about the topic, and then they read the text from their background knowledge first, and then the gist, like the superficial meaning of the text, and then go into details and specific information, and then you work on grammar and some vocabulary that is in the text if you want that to be in your class. As you mentioned, it gets old fast, right? Because when you get to class and you go, what do you think is the most difficult profession in the world? Students are already like, teacher brought a text about a very difficult profession for us to read today. they kind of predict what's coming.
You're right. I think it gets to a point that even the student will be able to teach the lesson. like they are able to, like, oh, okay, so now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. But again, variety is important. Think about ways to make the text interesting for the student. And because of that, you're going to have to select text that won't be in your course book, because you're going to think about some authentic materials. You have a lot of AI out there for people who love talking about AI. So you might want to find texts use AI for that. You obviously need to know where you want to get these students, right? Like, but if it's a reading lesson, not a language lesson, right? And I often see this thing that reading and listening are only used with the purpose of introducing language, of exposing students to target language. And that's a huge mistake, really, right? You need to focus on the skill that you want to teach, and not just like, okay, I'm looking for a way to teach grammar or vocabulary all the time.
Yeah, and I get this feeling that we teach the systems so that we can perform the skills. I think it's a practical perspective.
It is.
You know, we need grammar and we need vocabulary, but not for their own sake, right? We need grammar and we need vocabulary to read better, to write better,
And
to
to
listen
speak
better, and to
better.
speak better, right? So if we are teaching a reading class, but the reading class is actually just a means to vocabulary, we have this the other way around. We are using reading as a means to vocabulary, which is odd. We should use in my perspective, of course, we should use vocabulary to read better and not use the reading to learn vocabulary better. Because, I mean, what do you plan on doing with that vocabulary that now you learned?
What is your view on pre-teaching vocabulary?
I think it depends on the group. I feel that, and by the way, pre-teaching vocabulary that Walter mentioned, it's when you teach students words and sometimes expressions, even some grammar at times, that is key, that you think is key for students to understand the text, right? So you teach that before the text. That's pre-teaching vocabulary or grammar. I feel that with students who are okay with dealing with ambiguity, pre-teaching vocabulary is not necessary, right? Students can read a text with words and grammar that they don't know, and then still make out the meaning of the text and deal with the text and interpret and, well, work with the text without those words. However, there are some students who are not so tolerant of ambiguity, and they will stop when they find a weird word because they're not confident enough yet to deal with words that they don't understand. So for these students, I think pre-teaching is fine. Sometimes I wouldn't pre-teach every time because, well, again, as you said, it's not realistic, right? Students will face words out there that they don't know, and they have to be able to read the text. But I feel, but I feel that pre-teaching vocabulary, especially for students who are very unsafe,
They're insecure.
that's a nice word, diffident, which is the opposite of confident.
Speaking CPE-ish.
Speaking CPU, students who are diffident and they are afraid of speaking, they are afraid of reading and not understanding things, and not understand things. I think pre-teaching can go a long way.
You know that John Field, it's Field, the guy who wrote the book about listening. He has a theory of compensatory processing. And I specifically remember a friend of mine telling me about that. But the point is, and that's Stephanie, by the way, she talked to us about the Delta anyway. But the thing is, the more confident the student is, the more you can rely on top down. The more insecure or diffident they are, the more they need the bottom up.
Yeah, agreed.
To deal with to tackle the text. And we got to have a conversation about that later on as well, because it's an interesting one to have.
Yeah, and it seems that the goal is flipping the thing, right? So if students are insecure about their language skills, and then you go bottom up, the goal is that through time and through a couple of lessons, you manage to flip it upside down and go, okay, now let's go top down. It seems that top down is the goal. Maybe we should analyze that. Why is top down the goal? All right, everyone. So this was the second part of our discussion on the basic principles of teaching reading. For the next video, you can expect a more more practical approach on how to teach reading. We're going to cover a little bit of some frameworks to teaching reading. We're going to explore a little bit more of top down and bottom up. So if you didn't really understand what these two processes, I'd say, mean and how they're used, stand by for next week while we discuss this in a bit more depth. See you next week. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.